Hi everyone, we'll be about 2 minutes. Just grab yourselves a drink. We'll be back in about 2 minutes just to allow everyone to join. Hello and welcome to today's Customer Success webinar. Today we're going to demonstrate the fundamentals of planning, and then we're going to be following this webinar with another one in the next few months or so, just to give you the planning 102, which will going to give you a bit more in-depth information about the planning screen. Callum, one of our onboarder consultants, is going to go through the agenda and the demo, and this should take around 30 minutes. Firstly, I just need to make sure that everyone can hear us okay. If this is not the case, please raise your hands or just leave us a message on the right-hand side. One more thing that we have is a poll, just so I can get your feedback on the webinars and also improve these going forward. And yes, over to Callum.
Okay, so what we're going to be looking at on today's webinar then is firstly, how you can generate your week on the planning screen to be able to pull through all the visits that you're going to be allocating today. Then we're going to be looking at how we can allocate our visits on a single visit pattern, but also multiple allocation of visits in one go. After that, we'll be moving on to how we can deal with cancellations on just a single visit, but also how we can deal with a service suspension. So maybe someone may have left their services for a temporary period of time, and how we can deal with that. Later on, we'll be looking at how we can deal with actually moving visit times, so rescheduling them from certain times in the day. And then after that, we'll be looking at your rota generation, how you can pull out your rota from the system and how you can see certain people's rotas individually. And then after that, we're going through a brief summary going forwards. Okay, so the first part of our demonstration today on this planning webinar is going to be looking at how we can generate our weeks within the planning screen on PeoplePlanner and CareBots version 2. So the first thing that you have to do is go into planning, where everything planning related will be. You're going to go into generation and visits. And what you'll be able to see in here are all of the weeks that you've generated on your planning screen, which will allow you to be able to plan on them. So the idea behind the generation access part of the system is that when you generate a week, what it's going to do is pull through all of the availability of your employees that has been dictated to in their employee records. And it's also going to bring through all of the visits that you've built up in the client's funder area, where you said what visits they will receive on a regular basis part of their care plan. So you have to generate the week that you're going to be working on before you can generate and work on that week. So what you have to do, use the plus button down here, and it will give you all the dates for you automatically if you've generated a week before, because it will always pick up from where it left off. If you've never generated on your planning screen before, and this is the first time you're ever going to use your planning screen, you will have to type in the date that you want to start in the from date box, and it will automatically calculate 7 days for you. You press save, and then after that and therefore onwards, it will always take this structure. So to be able to do this, all you have to do is press save after you've pressed the plus button, and it will go through the status of submitted, generating, and generated. And once it's finally generated, it will then show on your planning screen with all the visits ready to be allocated. And there you can see, just like that, it's already generated, ready for us to be able to plan on. So once we've generated our week, and we can generate as many weeks as we like, what you can always do though is actually set up an automatic generation within your branch settings to be able to do this process for you. And the way that you can do that, just for reference, is if you come into settings, other, company, we're going to go into our branches within the quick links menu. And if you go into a branch itself, within the options, there is a visit auto generation number of weeks cycle. And whatever you put in here, that is the minimum amount of weeks that will be generated for you at any given time. Fantastic. Okay, so once you've then generated your week, we're going to bring you back now to the home area where we can go into planning, visit, and planning, which will open up our rostering screen for us, which will then allow us to start working on the planning element of the system. So the first thing that you can see on our planning screen, we have our clients on the top, and we have our employees down the bottom here. And the aim of the game is to make sure that all of the shifts that have been pulled through, or all of the visits that have been pulled through from the client's record, have been covered by said employees. So the aim of the game is to get all of these red visits covered by your employees below. So in terms of the way that we can do that, what we have to do is go through a process of allocation. So allocating shifts or visits to employees to make sure that those visits are covered. And there are 3 different ways that we can do that on the grand scheme of things. First way of being able to do it, if you left click on a visit, it will select that visit for you. And then what you can then do is just left click and hold. It will drag that visit down, and you can drag that visit and drop it on whoever you want it to show to. So what I'm going to do is drop it on David Lovejoy there. And once it's gone through the process, it will allocate that visit for me. And as you can see, it has now become allocated because you can see by the visual aid, the color system of the planning screen, that that visit has been allocated. Because the color system that we have on the planning screen is green as the main color of the visit, means it's been allocated and there's no problems with it at all. You've got red, which means that it's unallocated, ready to be allocated. And you might also see yellow as well. A yellow visit, nothing to be worried about. It's nothing to sort of mull over. The warnings here on the planning screen, they are there just to give you an idea about you might have not noticed this or you might not have noticed that. And these rules, they are configured in your system, so you can always change these rules to what they're going to do. But to be able to see what the warning is, if you double left click on a visit, that is showing that color. It will then present to you the warning. And if you click onto that warning, it will show you why. So this visit is nothing to do with the allocation as to why it's flagging up as a yellow call. The reason that it's flagging up as a yellow call is because actually the profit margin is not very good. So the employee is getting paid more for this visit than the client is being invoiced. So just going to give you that warning just to let you know that there might be something wrong with the way you've allocated this shift if you're going to work for a loss. Fantastic. So that was the first way of allocating your visits. What you can also do is you see your list of employees down here. You have a list of employees on the right hand side. What you can do is you can find the employee that you want to allocate to a visit. Just left click and hold on their name. You can drag their name over to the shift that you want to do, and you just drop their name on the shift, and then that will allocate that one that way too. And the third and final way of being able to allocate your visits on a visit by visit level is if you hover over a visit, right click, hover over allocate, and then click on the employee. It will then allocate that employee to the shift. Okay, so they are the 3 ways of allocating your shifts, but you do also have an additional way of allocating your shifts, which may be a little bit of a time saver for you going forward. So what we can do, depending on the way that we want to plan, obviously this might not suit for everybody, but it is a nice time saver for those that it does apply to, is what you can do is click on a person's name, i.e. a client's name, and what it will do is it will open up to not only view their Friday or their Wednesday or a day that you're looking at specifically. If you click on their name, it will open up it's called their single client view, and their single client view will open up that client's individual Monday through to Sunday. And this will just make it a little bit easier for you to allocate your shifts going forward, because on the most part, and again I say this very loosely, most people will be allocating their shifts the same sort of 3 or 4 employees to a client in 1 week. It will normally be the regulars on a general rule of thumb. So this might help you if you had that scenario within your business. So what you can do, instead of having David Lovejoy being allocated day by day against a shift, if we knew that David Lovejoy is going to be going on maybe 70% of these visits, we could use the multiple allocate feature to help us with that. So what we have in the system is a control button up here. This is a substitute key for a key on your keyboard. So on all of your keyboards, you'll be able to see a control button. Whether you press that and hold that down or press this feature, it will work in the same way. But the idea is that control button or that control tick over here will allow you to multiply select visits. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to left click on any visit that I know one employee is going to do. So David will do that one, this one, and this one, this one, this one, this one. Has the Wednesday off, this one, this one, this one. And then also does the Sundays, has the Saturday off. So now I know that all of those are going to be going to David Lovejoy. So what I can do once they are all selected, I can then right click on any one of the selected visits, hover over allocate and choose David Lovejoy. And that will allocate all of those selected visits or shifts to that one particular employee. And as you can see, if I press my deselect button over here, it's going to deselect everything, and I can see them all allocated fresh as they were to start with. So that's just a nice, easy way to be able to allocate multiple visits without having to go through day by day, one by one, and come back on yourself Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on and so forth. Fantastic. So main part of planning is making sure that our visits are allocated. But there are also things that happen not necessarily every day, every week, or maybe even every month, but it's not something that happens and maybe occurs every so often. You do need to know how to deal with these aspects. And what they could be is maybe a cancellation between a client and their shift. So cancellations can happen on two different levels. It could either be that they've cancelled one particular shift for one bizarre reason, or one reason is they only want one shift to be cancelled, or it could well be that they are cancelling their services for a prolonged period of time because they may have an extraneous circumstance, which means they no longer need the service temporarily. It could be that they have been admitted to hospital, or they're on holiday and they don't need the services for a temporary period of time. So what we have is we have two different features in the system which will allow us to deal with those. The first one, dealing with it on a visit by visit level, is if you right click on a visit that you want to cancel. So let's just say the Tuesday the 11th here is going to be cancelled. All you have to do is right click, hover over cancel, and you'll be presented with your cancellation reasons. These cancellation reasons, they have financial implications behind them. Okay, and these are going to be reasons that are configured by you and your system. So they're not necessarily going to be the same as I'm presenting to you right now. These can be configured in your settings area. If you go to settings, finance, cancellation types, and they will all be free to be built up in there. But what I will then be presented with on the front end of the system is the actual cancellation reasons that apply. So in my system, I have multiple different reasons. And as you can see, in brackets, I've written if they are being charged or paid, charged but not paid, charged, no charge, or anything like that. So I'm just going to choose the one that's relevant. So cancel on arrival is the reason I've chosen there. I'm just going to tick on that. And as you can see, that visit now has presented itself in a dark grey colour. So the dark grey colour just represents the fact that this has been cancelled. It's not going to be relevant. But because David Lovejoy was allocated to the shift, David Lovejoy can still be allocated to another shift if this one has been cancelled. So that's not going to be the issue. But it just allows the system to know that if you were going to pay David for that shift still, it knows how long David would have been there for and then how much to pay David for. Additionally, based on your configuration, you might actually want this to even show on the payroll and the invoice themselves. That is something that you can configure in the financial area. Fantastic. So that's the way that you can do it on a single by single visit. But if I want to reinstate this one, let's say actually we cancelled it, but he came back, I can right click, hover over cancel, and at the very bottom I do have an uncancel option there, which will just bring it back to its original visit values. If the employee didn't get allocated somewhere else before this cancellation came back, the employee will automatically be allocated to that shift as they were before. If David Lovejoy, in that interim of time that visit was cancelled, did get allocated somewhere else and therefore couldn't go to the shift anymore, this shift would automatically be unallocated and would be ready to be allocated to another person. But as I say, there are two ways of being able to deal with your cancellations. And the second way can be dealt with either through the planning screen itself or via the client record. So if we come back to our normal PeoplePlanner screen, and if we go into client, and find, and we go into a client record, what we'll be able to see are many options on the right-hand side, one of which being the service suspend option. This is where you'll be able to deal with suspensions that are going to be temporary, but you can then log that they're not going to be requiring their services for a period of time, and it will cancel any shift within that remit of time. You can access it through this area if you want to, but obviously quicker to you, and we're working on the basis that we want to be nice and quick on our planning screen right now. The quickest way of being able to do it is when you go into the single client view, it will present the name of the person up here. And what you can then do is click on their name and it will open up sort of an indented version of the file. Much the same as we saw before. So what we're going to be looking at now, coming into this area, is the service suspend option. And when we click into service suspend here, what we'll be able to do is log the time frame that that person has gone away. So clicking into service suspend and using the plus button on the top right hand corner here, what it will present us with are start date, start time, end date, end time, reason, and the ability to log a note as well. One thing that you might have noticed straight away is that the only thing that is mandatory in here are the start date and the start time and reason. The end date is open-ended. So if there was ever the example that the client has gone into hospital and you don't know when they're going to come out at that given time when you're adding it into the system, all you have to do is log in a start date and start time and then press save. And then when they come back out and they want to renew their services with you, you can put an end date in there at a later time, and it will just reinstate all the visits that were not going to be cancelled due to the time frame you've chosen. So we will demonstrate that now anyway. So what I can do, let's say, for example, on the 10th of the 12th, 2018, Jessica here went into hospital, went in at midnight, so all of the services there from midnight onwards are going to be null and void. We don't know when the person is going to be coming out yet, so we're going to leave the end date and end time blank right now. Whereas if they are going on holiday and you know exactly when they're going to be coming back, you can log the end date in here. It just saves you having to do that later on. What you then have to choose is a reason, so a service suspension reason. Once again, these are configured within your system, so they may not be the same options I have in my system, but you can build yours up if you'd like in your settings area against the client if need be. So I'm going to choose the option here that says hospital visit. And once I've done that, I can leave a note, but if I already know what's going on, I don't necessarily need to. So what I'm going to do now, press my save button down here. And once I save that in, it's going to cancel any shifts within that remit of time, which will then be technically indefinitely. Okay, so as you can see, nice and quick there, nice and easy to pull through. We can see that all the shifts have been cancelled between those time frames. And if we come back to the planning screen and give the planning screen a refresh, you'll notice that everything now has been cancelled from that time frame onwards. But if we go back 7 days, we'll notice that those cancellations aren't there. The shifts may not have been allocated, but they have not been cancelled. So what we can see, every single time you put a service suspension on, there will be a bar on the top of the day for that person, which you can hover over and see why they're away and how long for that day. So we can see hospital visit, midnight to midnight on this day, 24 hours. And anything within this remit of time has been cancelled. And if we go far enough forward to a week that has not been generated, as you can see, it will come through forever and ever and ever until we state an end date. So as you can see, we went quite far there, almost a month and a half in advance. Fantastic. So if we know that the end date, let's say, is on Wednesday morning, comes back Wednesday to start that day again, what we can do, click back into the record, go back to service suspend, edit the record that we'd already made, because obviously we're making an end date to the one that we just put in. If we click into here, I can then just put in a date. So I'm just going to say the 12th, 18. And they come back at midnight once again, just because obviously their services renew from that day onwards. And what I'm going to do, press save one more time, just going to confirm those time frames, reinstate any shifts in the background that are no longer needed to be cancelled, and it will reinstate those there. Fantastic. And as you can see, come through quite nice and quick there as well. And if I press the exit button and refresh the page, as you can see, when it loads through, it's reinstated everything as it first were. So you can see it's only cancelled anything up until the time frames I dictated. After that, though, nothing more will show. Nothing else will be affected. So once again, same as with those cancellations that we had on the single visit, if we do it on the service suspension level and we have a visit that was allocated before the suspension came in, the suspension then came in, and then the employee then got allocated to another shift in that remit of time. When you end that and bring those shifts back, i.e. these ones here, these ones have come back already allocated, but if David Lovejoy was allocated on Thursday when that shift was cancelled, this one will be unallocated, ready to be allocated to another party because David has other commitments now. Fantastic. Okay, so another thing that is quite handy for you to be able to do on your planning screen is actually move your visits. So when you build up your plans in relation to the clients, you say, client Jessica, for example, you're going to have a 9 until 11 call and then a 1 until 3 call. And this is a great idea to have these all planned in that way. But obviously things do change on the day-to-day, which might mean that visit is going to be a little bit earlier. You're going to have to jiggle them around a slight bit to be able to account for unforeseen circumstances. So there's two ways of being able to deal with these changings, these change of the visit times. And what you can do is either, depending on how steady your hand is, first way of doing it, you have the T and the B options. So the T and the B is another substitute key, much like the control button was. The T and the B are the substitute key for the shift key on your keyboard. So regardless of what you want to use, you can either use the shift key and not use these substitute keys, or just tick these here and it will basically be as if you're holding down the shift key on your keyboard as well. But what these functions do is it actually activates the little sort of grey lines inside each visit here, the grey markers, which will then allow you to then move the start time or the end time if need be. So if this visit actually started at 8:30 instead of 9, what I can do now that I've activated these buttons, actually left click and hold over the bar, and I can just change it along, and it'll update the time for me. I can also do that independently on the end time as well, which I can make it smaller or larger if need be. If I was happy with the duration, but it needed to be a different start and end time, what I can also do when that shift key is in place is I can left click on the shift, then I can just left click and hold and drag it along, and I can just move that time frame completely. If you've moved it like that and the person isn't available to do it, or it's clashing with another shift, it will automatically bring it back to where it first was, just to reset it to how it was, because you can't have David, for example, be in 2 places at the same time. We try and do that. As you can see, it moves it straight back, because I can't do David Lovejoy's visit twice at the same time. They are 2 independent visits. So that is the first way that you can do it. The second way that you can do it, and if you have a less steady hand like myself, what you'll always be able to do is double left click on a shift. It will open up that visit menu for you. So you can literally change anything that you like in here. So getting sidetracked, but you can change the date that the visit was going to go on to, the start and end time, which is relevant to what we're talking about right now. But we can also change things like who the funder is. If they have multiple funders, we can change the service. So if it's going to be from a companionship to maybe a care call instead, we can change that if need be. We can change the visit type. That will appear on the employee and client rotas. And we can also override the values if we needed to do that too. We can also change our allocation in here just for reference. But the reason that we've come into here is to change these times. So let's just say it was a 0900. I'm going to change that time in there. And if I click away, you'll notice that the end time will update automatically for me. Because the first time you ever do this, it will update the end time to match the duration that previously existed. So just try and be a bit of a hand there. Normally, if you say that someone has a 3-hour shift, regardless of when it starts, it will always then be that 3-hour shift as per their contract. But if you wanted to change the end time too, you're more than welcome to, because if you do that, it will then forget the link of the duration and just allow you to retype your times. So once we've got that in there, and we've confirmed everything that we're ready to do, we can then press our save icon. Once we save our shift, come out of the visit and refresh the page, as you'll be able to see, visits come back as normal. Fantastic. Okay, so they are your ways of being able to change your visit times. One major part of the system, though, that people always like to pull out is the actual rota itself. Okay, so in our demonstration today, I'm just going to be going through how to pull out your rotas. And the way that we can do that, we can do it in multiple different ways. We can do it either quick linked from the planning screen, or we can go back into Core People Planner and generate it from there. So what I'm going to do now is show you both. So the first one that you can do, if you see on this actions bar at the top timeline ribbon, you'll be able to see an option that says click to generate your rotas. If you click on that, what it will do is it will open up People Planner for you. And as you can see, all the rotas are in the system here for you. So one thing that happens with the way that rotas work is when you generate a week in the system, like we did at the very beginning of this demonstration, when you generate a week in the system, it will automatically generate that corresponding time frame for you in the rota area. So you don't have to generate the rota once you've generated a week, it will automatically happen for you. When your rotas are generated, okay, there will be a free-flowing passage of information between the planning screen and the rota itself. So any allocations, unallocations, or cancellations will immediately respond if your rota is generated but not accepted. That free-flowing passage of information will change when you accept your rota. So once that rota is accepted, any changes made after that acceptance will not pull through to the rota. So only accept your rota when you are ready and happy for it to go out. However, it may well be that you sent the rota out ready for the week commencing the 14th of January already, but you get 2 or 3 days in and something changes, and it changes the outcome of maybe the 19th or the 20th of January. What you can always do is change those allocations on the planning screen, which is fine. What you would have to do when this is accepted is all you have to do is just unaccept it. Just like that, just click on it and unaccept it there. And what that would allow you to do is reignite the free-flowing passage of information between the planning screen and the rota, and it will update the rota for you, ready to be sent out as a new and improved version from maybe the 15th onwards. Fantastic. So once you've got your rota in play, what you can always do, as you can see, you've got your printer on the right-hand side here. So you can access your rota maybe before it's all finished, and you can do a print preview of that rota as well. So picking out one at random, I'm just going to choose this one here. You can use the printer. The options will always be the same regardless of what you choose. So you can choose it on a branch and area level. So if you wanted to pull out the information in relation to one branch, more than welcome to filter that way. You also have to choose a rota format, so you can have multiple formats of rota within your system, and that is entirely your call. But what you have to do is then choose the dates that you want. So it will always default to the week-by-week generation timeframes that have happened before, so always Monday to Sunday in a general rule of thumb. But you can always extend your timeframes as well. So if you wanted to extend the end date, you can press on the end date and make it a bit larger. As you can see, it will account for 14 days. So you don't have to pull out your rotas week by week. If you want to send out a rota on a month-by-month level, that is more than possible. But you will have to account for the fact that things do change in a month's time. So you might have to send out multiple rotas in that instance. What you can also do is filter your rota by employee or client level. So if you want to send an employee-facing rota, choose employee. If you want to send it on the client's version, you can, of course, choose on the client level too. But whatever you're filtering by, you can either then produce it on an all level or actually choose a selection of individuals. So what you can do here, you can see a list of my employees here, and I can click it one by one if I wanted to. Or what I can do if I wanted to select multiple, I can hold down Control on my keyboard and just tick multiple people. And it doesn't have to be people next to each other or anything like that. I can then just select at will. Fantastic. You also then have a delivery method preference. So in the employees file, in the HR section, in the communications tab, there will be two options at the very bottom, and it will be their preference of delivery method for their rota and their gross payslip. Whatever you choose in the employees file will be their preference of how they receive it now. So if you choose paper, you will only see people that have asked to have their rota preference as paper in their file. If you chose something like email instead and then chose paper in here, you wouldn't see those people on there. So if you want to do a print preview of the whole company, I would always recommend choosing all, because then that will allow you to see everybody regardless of their preference. And what we also have in here is the ability to view or print our rota in the planning times or the actual times. So this is only relevant for those people out there that have electronic call monitoring. So maybe Mobizio or CM2000 or PeoplePlanner Mobile, anything where your employees can book on and book off. Because when you're sending out your rota for the week ahead, there's going to be no time frames that pull through from the actuals as of yet. They're not actually going to have been there. So that's fine. It doesn't matter what you do on that instance. But let's say, for example, you sent out a rota that was supposed to be from the 14th, well, we've got here from the 3rd until the 16th. And let's say on the 7th of December, something changed and we had to send out the whole rota again. What would happen if we chose it to actual is it would show for the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, all of the actual times that the employees were there when they started and when they left their shift. And it may well get a little bit confusing for people receiving their rota again, because it will look like they might have received the wrong one if they don't look hard enough. So my advice would be, you don't have to live by this, but my advice would be always choose the planning option here anyway. It will always show them the scheduled start and end times of their visits, which is ideally what you want them to hit. And it won't show them necessarily the actuals that have been pulled through from when they actually got there on the shift on the Monday, for example. But once you've chosen all this and you've got your configuration how you would like it to be, all you then have to do is press your export button over here and it will generate the report for you. And once you've generated that report, it'll give you a PDF document for you. And as you can see, just zoom out a little bit, it will give you a PDF document of all of the information in here. So as you can see, we've got our company name, we've got the rota by employee, and it tells us all the information that we want to see. But employee by employee, it will show you all of the information that you've got there. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, make it a bit easier for you to see. We can see here, these are all the visits for Mo Brooks, my employee, between the 3rd of the 12th and the 16th of the 12th here. We can see the start and end time, duration, client, and the service that they're providing. And it's broken down by day, who the start time, end time, and who the client is there, and what service it may be. So we know that the difference between our care service, our companionship service, maybe our sleep-ins or our waking nights as well. It allows us to see that on the rota itself. And it will always be broken down on a day by day, and the visits will be ordered in chronological order as well. As you can see, every single person has their own unique page, so it will never populate them on the same page, which is easier for you to send out if you did produce it this way. And it will show much in this format here. You can edit your formats within the settings area, which we will be looking at in just a moment. Fantastic. So once you have then gone through and you've generated your rota and you're happy with it, you've just done that print preview and you're absolutely fine with it, it's ready to go out. All you then have to do is just accept it. Once it's accepted, it will then be ready to ship out to the employees. Fantastic. So we mentioned just a moment ago about being able to actually edit what our rotas look like, the formats that we have in there. So what we're going to do is quickly just dive through that and show you how you'll be able to edit that if that's something you would like to do. So heading back into Core People Planner, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see that a bit better. What we're going to do is head into Settings, Planning, Rota, and Formats. So the rota formats, if you haven't ever edited these before, there will be a standard solution for you in the system, which will be as you were. You can either edit the ones that you've got, or you can create brand new ones, and that is entirely your call. You can have as many as you like in here. It's not going to be a hindrance to your system because you assign them to a rota when you produce that rota. So what you can do, just clicking into the one that we've already made earlier, first thing you'll be able to do is just give a general detail, what it's called and how it's going to style itself. But what we can do going through our tabs is actually build up our rotas and what they show and what they don't show, more importantly, by employee and by client. So what we've got here is by the employee, we can then say that we want to include or exclude certain informations depending on what we tick. But you have to read them because obviously it does say some of these things are on there by default, some of them are not. So if you tick it, it's asking to remove the thing by default. And if you ask it to include, it's going to include something that is a bonus extra that was not included on the default solution. So depending on what you want to do, if I want to include notes or include key safe number, I'm going to tick to include. If I want to hide things like remove the mileage from there, I can tick that and it will remove the miles columns for me. And I can build that up how I see fit and save it when relevant. I can also add custom footers. So if there's something that you wanted to do, maybe put a phone number in the rota that will allow them to get in touch with the office if they have any queries. You can type in here along the lines of any queries you have coming up, please contact this phone number to speak to our reception team or our rostering team. Fantastic. You can also do this on a client level. They can include actuals. They'll also be able to include their client number if you have it. These are all things that you can produce if you want to, but you don't have to change this from a standard solution if you're happy with the way it presents itself. You can also go through and deal with the address details. So at the moment, it doesn't include employee or client addresses on the rota. However, if you want them to show, tick where relevant, and they'll come through as you see. And additionally, you do have the ability to log a image against the rota if you want to. So if you do have an image relating to your company logo, for example, and you want it to show, you have it on your computer as a file, you can upload using the upload feature here. It will allow you to browse your computer using this option here. You can upload, and then once you've done that, it will then present itself on the rota for you. You can also then choose as well where you want it to sit. So you can choose on the center of the page, the left-hand side or the right-hand side to slightly indent the rota and the logo if that's something that you would see fit. But these are all down to you and your personal decisions. Once you've done all of that, you then will be able to save the rota. So you have to come back to general details to save all of your progress to confirm that it's all done. And once you've then done that, it will then confirm that rota going forward in exactly the way that you want it to present itself. And from that point onwards, it will always show in that way. Fantastic. So that's actually all for our demonstration on our planning part 1. There will be another planning webinar coming soon, which will be dealing with other aspects of the planning system. What I'm going to do now is pass you over to Elio. He'll be able to talk to you more about what's going on in the Health and Social Care division for you.
Thank you very much for that. We've had a few questions coming through, and they're actually the same questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Callum to get the answers for these, and then I'll forward this on the follow-up email so everyone can have the answers. Thank you for being so patient, and please leave us your feedback on the following poll. So the question is, would you recommend this webinar to other people? Obviously, we have the different rankings. So 10 and 9s are good scores, and that means you recommend to other people. 7 and 8, it's that you would think that the webinar was okay. Anything below a 7, I would appreciate if you leave some feedback on the box so I can act upon these and then improve the webinar going forwards. So I'll leave the poll up for a few more seconds. I'll leave it for a few more seconds whilst everyone answers. Great, thanks for that. Really great scores there, so really appreciate it. I'm not going to go through the community and the support portal with you because I can see that most of you already signed up. However, if you do need a demo or more links about it, if you just let me know on the survey at the end of the webinar, I'll be able to forward this to you. And yeah, this is the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, Callum. Hope you found this useful, and I'll see you soon.